welcome back to Brashonomics. I'm Ben Brashin, joined today by Cameron Johnson, a good friend of our show, by phone, because, as we talked about, some things stop in the world during the holidays. Well, Cameron's car stopped running too. Hey, Cam, how you doing, buddy? You get off the freeway okay?
I did. I made it into a parking lot in time, and thank you for asking, and also thanks for having me on the air today, guys.
Well, you got it. What happened to your car? I'm curious,
To be determined, engine death, and then scary, scary rattle when I tried to turn it back on. At that point, I, much like you preach on Brashonomics, I decided to let the experts weigh in.
I thought for sure you'd be getting under the hood. Well, Cameron, it's good to see you. You know, we work with Itex, a company that really helps their clients enrich their businesses and personal lives through organized trade. And, I guess with a fiscal cliff looming and everybody worried about the U.S. economy, some people start to maybe like to have a little bit more control over the value of their business. Barter and exchange does seem to be one of those ways. Would you agree?
I think so. Yeah, it allows a business owner particularly to almost directly extract value from their daily operations by getting things in return for putting out more work.
And then, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say without that pesky U.S. dollar having to get in the middle.
Yeah, the up and down and up and down. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's considering going into that, going into barter to maybe grow their business, is there big answers that people need to certain questions? Are there questions people should be asking before they join an exchange network?
Sure. I think there's two kinds of questions, which is one of the things that sort of separates us from any vendor or business you're going to, not any, but almost any, you're going to ask a few questions, like a situation like mine where I'm going to go see a mechanic today. I want to know a little bit about the shop before I just blindly walk into one on the street. So there's those types of questions that you ask about the business, based on your understanding of the industry, et cetera. And also when you're looking to try trade as a part of your business, there's also questions you should ask about yourself. There's some self-analysis you should do in addition to the sort of standard type questions that those of us in the industry think are good to ask of the groups you're looking at.
All right. Well, why don't we start with the questions that you would ask? Or why don't we start with the self-analysis? Because I imagine if you can't get past the self-analysis part, then you would have no reason to ask the questions to the exchange companies.
That's a great point. Well, question number one, and I think I've actually mentioned this on your show before, do I have capacity to take on more customers? Very simple question, hopefully easily answered, pretty straightforward, but that's question number one. If you don't have room for more customers, if you're always busy, you're always frantic, well, barter's not going to help much because the first thing barter does is bring you more customers. So if you can't handle them, if you don't have the capacity without extending your fixed costs and opening up your operation, which you don't necessarily need to invest in order to get in the trade, that's a question that's really telling. Can I take more customers as is right now?
Right.
And the second question I think that is really important to ask is, what am I looking to get out of this? Organized trade, I'm a huge proponent of it, obviously, but it's a specific tool that's got specific purposes that it's good at. And so, you want to make sure that your goals, your desire matches, what this group would bring to the table.
And I guess if you're looking at your desires or, what you're trying to do, I would imagine what you're going to get out of it, not necessarily through business, but what you're able to spend would be a big part too. I mean, do you want the stuff that other groups are offering?
Exactly. And that's sort of a question about yourself and about the company, but you can step back a little bit and make it a broader question because while every trade group like mine varies from location to location and sometimes from company to company, there are some sort of common general rules that apply to all of them. For example, services are easier to trade for than hard products most of the time. There's higher margins, it's easier and more it's possible to absorb the costs of additional business into a service business more easily than it is into a manufacturing group or someone that does retail.
Sure.
So if you already know, hey, I want to barter, but the only thing I want are supplies for my business that I'm going to use to sell, well, that's probably not going to happen unless you get very lucky or really well connected. So the types of things you're looking to trade for are pretty telling, right off the bat.
Sure. And I guess when you talk about services, there's a lot of different ways you could go with that. I mean, it could be services for your business, for your home, maintenance. Hey, I bet you have car repair, buddy.
Well, I am being towed to an Itex mechanic, as well, not as we speak, but we'll be pretty soon.
You're going to be you'll be our first ever interview from the cab of a tow truck. We're here with Cameron Johnson, broker with Itex. So, Cameron, if people determine that going into a trade network is right for them based on what we had just discussed, number one being, do you want the stuff that trade network offers you in exchange? And also, if you have the capacity, or if your business has the capacity to essentially take on more business, then what questions should a potential new person or new business going into the world of trade be asking the trading company?
Well, there's a number of questions. First of all, trade groups work as payment processors and almost, microeconomies, in that they've got groups of people that are all doing business with one another. So you want to gauge the size and scope of the business as a whole. Is it large enough to have the variety of services you want, which we've kind of already touched on? Is it large enough that it's been in business for a good period of time and is stable? One thing with some of the smaller companies that, I certainly don't hear about this happening all the time, but it is a potential risk, is what if your barter company, 5 years down the road goes out of business? What happens to all the trade credits you've built up? I don't think there's a lot of value with barter dollars with a barter company that doesn't exist anymore. So, profitability, financial stability, things like this, almost like looking at a bank to bank with, those are very important from a big picture perspective. You also want to look at the type of fees they charge, the size of the network. Again, that ties into your sort of desires for the products you're looking for, and the type of service they offer. Some of the companies are more self-service. You put your items up online, you see what's out there, and you can make some connections. Some companies like mine are a little more hands-on, where we have account managers that are working with our customers every day. I think you tend to get more value from a company like that, but it also demands a little more of your time. It's a little more hands-on. So those are a few questions I would look at to start: the size and scope of the company, financial stability, the type of costs that they charge to work with them, and sort of the style in which they work. If it's more hands-off, if it's more online, or if it's a little more hands-on and direct.
So, I mean, I guess I think one of the big points that you really make there is if, a few years down the road they go out of business, how would you even, how do you check the viability of a company like that?
Well, there's some basic research you can do on the internet. There's some, boy, I wish I had URLs off the top of my head. I don't. But, there's some lookups you can do to look at sort of the when a company was first put into business. You can look at really rough tax filings as far as, they filed taxes all these years in these states. One good thing to do is just honestly to ask. If people ask us, I tell them how long we've been around, how long my branch has been around. That's the first thing is to look the rep or someone that works at the company, sit down with them and ask them about the company. Most of the folks in the industry that I know are forthcoming and excited about it. So, that's where I'd really start.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay. Let's say that then we'll carry this conversation forward. Let's say that it meets all your your personal or your business questions to a good point, and the trade company seems to be viable and good. And there's certain things that you would like to exchange for. I believe you call them prime items. Things like airfares, computers, hotel rooms. The sexy items that you could actually it's fun to use rather than your car repair. Which is much less sexy.
But pretty practical.
Very practical. But I imagine that, the fun items are definitely things that everybody wants. You had mentioned that there's some differences in ways those are distributed.
Yeah, that can happen. Like anything else, the trade world is capitalist. It's a capitalistic group. So there are, like anybody else, there are usually heavier traders than others. Bigger customers, so to speak. And so when you have an item that's in demand, one of the things you want to do is make sure that the way these things are distributed is I guess, equitable in a sense. And that, again, relies on, I think, strong communications with your trade company, really. In my business, it's not necessarily our highest dollar customers that, are the ones we talk to about interesting and high-value items. It's the people we communicate with regularly, to be totally frank. We, like any business, we've got multiple levels of communication between ourselves and our customers. Some folks are always checking in on with us, seeing what's going on, seeing what's new in our world, and also, what kind of opportunities we're putting together for them. And we have other people that are, they're seasonal, or, okay, I do all my trading in the summer to get the money, and then I spend it all on my taxes and getting my house cleaned up at the end of the year. So, I think your participation and your level of interaction with the group is usually what dictates things like that.
Well, it seems like all of those items to cover would be important, and then figuring out how, you said if you're going to be spending those trade credits at different parts of the year, understanding how that would affect you as well would be a big piece of that to make sure it's a good fit for you and your business. Cameron, we do have to go. Thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with your tow truck and getting your car fixed, buddy. We'll talk to you soon. Happy holidays.
You too, guys. Thank you.
All right. You're listening to Brashenomics. We'll be back after this break.